Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
So Rishi Sunak is now Prime Minister and they're all playing happy families. Are the Conservatives now a united force? That's my debate this evening. I have to say I have my doubts. We go to a house just outside Dover where a woman on Sunday morning found a migrant in one of the bedrooms. Why did the Kent police try to cover up this story? And joining me on Talking Pints, Konstantin Kisin. He's a podcaster, a Russian emigre who's written a book, An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West. A lot to debate and discuss with him. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening to you. Well, a busy day in Downing Street today. The new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has been busy appointing his new cabinet. Let's take you through the names then. Jeremy Hunt is staying on as Chancellor of the Exchequer. Still not clear, though, whether he's going to be publishing his fiscal plan on Monday. Other key appointments that took place throughout the afternoon include Dominic Raab, who's returning as Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary. James Cleverly remains Foreign Secretary. Ben Wallace retains Defence as well. And Suella Braverman, again, Home Secretary, less than a week after she resigned over a breach of the ministerial code. Grant Shapps is also with the business portfolio, and Penny Mordaunt remaining as the leader of the House of Commons. Other significant appointments include Kemi Badenoch, who returns as International Trade Secretary, and Michael Gove, who returns as Levelling Up Secretary after being sacked by Boris Johnson in July. Well, earlier, speaking for the first time as the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak vowed to fix what he called the mistakes of Liz Truss's leadership. After he met Prince Charles at Buckingham Palace, he pledged to place economic stability at the heart of his government, but warned the country should brace itself for difficult decisions ahead.
I understand how difficult this moment is. After the billions of pounds it cost us to combat COVID, after all the dislocation that caused, in the midst of a terrible war that must be seen successfully to its conclusions, I fully appreciate how hard things are.
Well, regarding how hard things are, new figures are showing the price of low-cost groceries like pasta, tea and cooking oil have all soared. The Office for National Statistics says budget items have increased by around 17% over the last 12 months. And that's as inflation returned to a 40-year high, with prices up 10.1% in a single year. Food prices, the biggest driver of the higher cost of living last month. Support for energy bills is set to become law after it was fast-tracked through Parliament. It includes the energy price guarantee, which means households will pay up to an average of £2,500 a year until April next year. It also addresses the energy bill relief scheme, which will help the public sector with discounts. The Qatari government has denied a British human rights activist was arrested and released by police in Doha. That comes after Peter Tatchell staged the first public LGBT+ protest in any Gulf state ahead of next month's World Cup. A video appeared to show him being approached by a police officer outside the National Museum. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. Well, yet another huge day in Westminster. Liz Truss in Downing Street this morning before going to see the King, gave her final speech as Prime Minister, and she was unrepentant about her aim and ambition to reduce the size of the state, to reduce taxation, and to have a big push for growth. It was then Rishi Sunak's turn. Having returned from Buckingham Palace, he gave his first speech as Prime Minister outside Number 10. It was nothing like the horrendous, robotic performance yesterday where he sort of stared at the autocue. Now, today he spoke with a bit more humanity, a bit more passion, although needed to refer to his notes about once every 7 or 8 seconds. Quite why these people don't believe in themselves enough to be able to stand up and speak for a few minutes to the nation without needing notes or prompts, I simply don't know. He's now appointed a new cabinet. We'll go through that in a moment. And everyone is playing happy families. It's as if the civil war of last week had never happened, and they're all pretending it's fine. The party will unite around Rishi Sunak and all will be well. And that's what you'll read in the Conservative newspapers tomorrow. I've got to tell you, I don't believe a word of it. The splits are still there. The globalists are completely in control. And I think it'll be a matter of weeks before they're once again fighting like rats in a sack. But you tell me, am I right? Am I wrong? Are the Conservatives now united? Let me know your thoughts. Farage at gbnews.uk. Now, to find out who's in, who's out, and one appointment that I really do approve of, let's go to GB News reporter Olivia Utley, who is outside Number 10, Downing Street. Olivia, please tell us who is in and who is out of the Rishi Sunak cabinet.
Well, as you say, Nigel, it feels as though things superficially at least have calmed down a little bit today. Rishi Sunak had to sort of play 4D chess to try and get all these different factions, warring factions, into his cabinet. And at least on the face of it, he seems to have managed that. He's brought in some of his own loyalists. Dominic Raab is back. He is now Justice Secretary, the appointment the position he used to have. Simon Hart is Conservative Chief Whip. Nadhim Zahawi is in Cabinet, but he's chairman of the party. Then, of course, we've got Suella Braverman, which was a big coup for the right wing of the Conservative Party, who were very much hoping that she would get her old job back, because she's considered to be sound on immigration. She left Parliament, she left government, it seemed, because Jeremy Hunt had perhaps edged her out. That was the rumour going round, because he disagreed with her about immigration. So perhaps Rishi Sunak, that's an indication he's going to be quite serious about immigration. You've got Kemi Badenoch has retained her post as International Trade Secretary, but it's been beefed up. She's got the equalities position too, which again will be reassuring to those on the right. She's been very serious about getting critical race theory out of schools. Gillian Keegan was a very big promotion, which is a little bit, she's seen as the sort of one nationer. Some people talk about her as the future of the future leader of the party. One Nation has talked about her like that. That'll go down less well with those on the right of the party who worry about her stance on gender issues, for example. Jeremy Hunt has kept his position as Chancellor. That's going to definitely reassure the markets, but the swinging cuts he's going to make across public services will almost definitely be very unpopular. Another interesting person who's kept their position is Ben Wallace, and there was talk about that. He's very, very popular with grassroots members, but he has said that he will only serve in a cabinet if the Prime Minister commits to 3% defence spending. That was a serious red line for him. So it's assumed there that Rishi Sunak will stick to 3% defence spending. Then, as you say, at the moment, it looks like happy families, but it could be that this unity, everyone has united behind Rishi Sunak, but for now, it's possible that that unity turns out to be miles wide and a couple of inches thick. It's hard to see how Jeremy Hunt's tough tax rises and spending cuts are going to square with Ben Wallace's approach to beefing up defence, for example, and many, many other contradictions like that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. But Olivia, I guess what we can say is after the absolute chaos of the last 6 or 7 weeks, there is at least an air of calm as I see it in Downing Street this evening.
There's definitely an air of calm in Downing Street. And I think we saw a very different Rishi Sunak today than the Rishi Sunak that we saw over the summer. Perhaps strangely, given that he's now sort of been proved right, one could say, and is now in Downing Street where he wanted to be. He seems quite chastened. Everything about his performance today was low-key, understated. His wife and children, for example, weren't there when he was going into Downing Street. His appointments and sackings were carried out with very little fuss. The speech he gave to the nation, although it was long, it was pretty sober in tone. And that's very different from the sort of bombastic Rishi Sunak we saw over the summer, who was accused of being too slick, who was accused of shouting over Liz Truss. It feels as though this man is here, he's a serious man for serious times, is the impression that he's trying to put across. And for now, at least, the Tories seem to be prepared to put aside the factionalism and stick with him.
Olivia Utley from Downing Street, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, there you are. Michael Gove is back. Jacob Rees-Mogg is out. Suella Braverman is back as Home Secretary. Professor Matthew Goodwin from University of Kent, political commentator, joins me. Matthew, you were very critical of Rishi Sunak earlier on this year.
Yep.
It seems to me you're joining the club that say it's all going to be fine now, everyone's united, he's going to move the party on to great things, or am I perhaps putting words in your mouth?
I don't think it's going to be fine. The Conservatives are averaging 20% of the vote. They're facing a wipeout at the next general election. We've had polling today that's showing them well behind Labour in the red wall. So, make no mistake, there is still an existential crisis facing the Conservative Party. But what I think Sunak needed to do today, he's essentially done, where he's come out and said, look, the winning ticket, if there is one to be found, a bit like the Willy Wonka golden ticket in 2024, is to go back to that 2019 manifesto and to talk about levelling up the country, dealing with migration, defending Britain's borders, investing in the NHS, all those kinds of policies. And that's what you saw him do today. Now, the jury's out. I could be here 3 months' time. We could be saying, well, actually, this is a complete catastrophe. But for day one, he's done what he needs to do.
And that's the stability point, isn't it?
Yeah.
He brings stability, but if stability means a continuation of failed policies, I mean, putting Braverman in as Home Secretary is a big message. We know the Channel crisis is enraging the country. In fact, the further north you go, the angrier they are about this, because that's where the hotels are filling up. But if you overpromise and underdeliver, it doesn't work, does it?
I think that's the big gamble. He's come out and said he's the guy that's finally going to deliver that 2019 manifesto. He's going to go into that next general election saying, look, I've made the best out of Brexit, we've invested in the NHS, we've taken control of Britain's borders. If he can't actually show those things, he's going to be in trouble. The other thing, of course, to keep in mind is, this is a deeper point that's underlying the Sunak premiership and the Truss premiership. What is the Conservative Party today? If it isn't just about economic competence and credibility, which is what the party likes to talk about, what is it beyond that? What does it believe? What is it that hangs this party together? And I think that is the riddle that Sunak is going to have to try.
How do you put Kemi Badenoch
and solve?
How do you put Kemi Badenoch in education? We might have a clearer steer.
So I think the fact Kemi Badenoch has stayed in trade is interesting. I think the fact that people like Therese Coffey have stayed, Truss loyalists have stayed, Johnson loyalists have stayed.
It's an attempt to unite the party.
I can see that. It's an interesting move, because remember, what Truss did is she doubled down on her own side. She went into that siege mentality. She said, you're either with me or you're against me. He's clearly come out and said, right, he said it himself, it's unite or die. If the party doesn't actually get a grip, Labour is looking at the biggest majority it's had since 97. And I've never seen numbers like we're seeing at the moment in the polls, Nigel. I've never seen the Conservative Party this weak. It reminds me of the 90s in Canada. It reminds me of that Conservative Party in Canada that was suddenly taken over, that completely imploded. And so Sunak, to me, he's either going to turn this ship around or it's going to just continue to sink. And that's where we are with the Conservative Party, I think.
So unite or die was the right message. You think he gives them half a chance?
I'm going to watch him for 3 months and see what happens.
OK. Very guarded. Matt Goodwin, thank you very much indeed. And yes, they are in very, very real trouble. Polling at around about 20%. There may be something of a Sunak bounce. But what do the activists think? Because let's face it, Conservative Party members have been ignored in this process. They have not had a say. And in many ways, You know, what was said during Truss's brief premiership is you, the party members, got it wrong. We know better than you. Well, we're better to find out the mood of the activists and, of course, the very popular political website, Conservative Home. William Atkinson joins me, assistant editor. You're on the front lines, and these are the men and women that give money, deliver leaflets, stand for council elections. They are the essential machinery of a political party. Obviously, it's been completely catastrophic for the last few weeks. Is there an air of calm today?
I think there is. I think especially the manner in which Sunak became leader, the fact that it was essentially the product of it was becoming obvious that he had overwhelming support amongst MPs and that no other MP was either willing or able to challenge him, meant that he's actually been able to form a cabinet of all the talents. And I think different to when Liz Truss came in, she decided to...
All the talents or of all the different political wings?
No, I would say of all the talents, because we're bringing back people such as Michael Gove, for example, who's always been a highly effective minister. And though I see there's been a lot of complaints by the tofu eaters and Guardian readers of Twitter so far about the reappointment of Suella Braverman, I think, frankly, she's far closer to the voters on issues like immigration and protecting our borders.
That I agree with. I agree with that. But I mean, bringing Michael Gove back into cabinet when you're aiming at unity, I mean, he's been just about the most disruptive figure in Conservative politics for the last 6 years.
Well, I would say Michael is disruptive as a minister, but I wouldn't necessarily he's disruptive as a force in the party. I think there was a time in which, you know, when his leadership ambitions got ahead of him in 2016, especially, when he was perhaps more of a disruptive figure. But I think from my own personal experience of Michael and his, actually the opinion of him within the party itself is that especially since 2019, he is seen, especially on a governmental level, as the guardian of levelling up, the person who most understands what it was that drove that sort of victory of the
What is
Conservative Party.
levelling up? No one's ever explained it to me.
Well,
does it mean taking money from the south and giving it to the north? Is that all it is?
Well, as somebody who has to edit endless articles on this from various different MPs trying to climb the greasy pole, I have had about 15 different answers a day on what levelling up means.
Exactly.
But I think fundamentally, from the pitch that we made to those voters in 2019, it was this is a Conservative Party that's not all about asset stripping and closing down factories and making the South richer and, you know, helping out bankers, etc. This is a Conservative Party that wants to spread opportunity. And the way that Michael Gove, when he was last Levelling Up Secretary, talked about that was not only devolving power, but devolving the ability that local communities can have those powers to actually change their own local environments.
It's so theoretical.
It isn't theoretical.
It's really academic, very theoretical. And look, actually, if you're talking about levelling up an enterprise, Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget talked about the creation of enterprise zones, talked about support for small entrepreneurship. What we've now got, and I put this to you, what we're going to have is, particularly on the small businesses, the medium-sized businesses, the sole traders, what we're going to have on the 1st of April is a near 30% rise in corporation tax, an increase in dividends tax, which is how most small businessmen and women pay themselves, and no relaxation, no reconsideration of the IR35 rules. Does the Conservative Party believe in small business and free market enterprise?
I would say the Conservative Party does believe in small businesses and free market enterprise, but we also have to recognise the political situation that we're in. Whoever was in power, whether Labour or whichever Tory Prime Minister we decide to have next week, is going to have to make some very difficult decisions based on what the international market environment is. Now, the corporation tax rise, not necessarily something that I fundamentally agree with. You know, I think a lower corporation tax rate is a better one. But we are in an environment where other countries are also raising theirs. Ours still remains one of the lowest in the G7. And I think one thing that we should look out for is that it was Rishi Sunak who, as Chancellor, introduced various different investment allowances and the like to go along with that rise in corporation tax, which were then scrapped when the rise was overturned under Kwarteng and Truss. And I imagine we're going to start to see some of those coming back. And when Rishi Sunak has talked about this sort of thing, whether as Chancellor or in his leadership campaign, he made very clear, and I've seen him in rooms full of, you know, small businessmen talking about this sort of thing.
Talking and not delivering.
No, delivering, because he understands that it's important that they have those investment opportunities. And I would say we are going to have a very complex few weeks, especially with the fiscal sort of plan that's coming on the 31st of October. A lot of things are up in the air at the moment, but I would say that Rishi Sunak understands exactly these issues, and I've seen him look small business people in the eye and discuss these, you know, especially as he finds it very easy to look especially small business people in the eye. I would say he understands this issue, and don't be too dismissive of it.
No, but I tell you what, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, he failed to notice that government policy in this country and across the West would lead directly to rising inflation. He was asleep at the wheel as inflation gripped the country, as was Boris Johnson, as was the Governor of the Bank of England.
No, Nigel, I would say you're completely wrong on that, actually. Rishi Sunak was one of the first sort of finance ministers and wider commentators when the Financial Times class was saying, no, don't worry about inflation. You can see back as far as, April 2021, he was already talking about how difficult it was going to be for paying back our debt, which is where all of these tax rises came from.
Actually, inflation makes paying back the debt easier in some ways because it devalues the money.
In the longer term, but in the shorter term, if the cost of servicing our debt is going up, as you well know, Nigel, we need to find some money very quickly from somewhere if we want to maintain the levels of public spending that we want to have. Now, the problem is, of course, is that with Trustonomics as an experiment, which I was always very sceptical of, those costs have gone up even further than we expected them to. But we also see gilt yields and the like going back down again. So I think I'm relatively optimistic, especially with some of the news we've got in the last few days about energy prices, with gas prices, etc., going down very quickly, that the situation this winter might not be as bad as we expected. But I would struggle to recognise in your comments there a reflection of the reality that Rishi Sunak was talking about inflation before lots of people were.
Well, I'd like to have heard it a bit louder, but that's fine. And there we are. I admire William Atkinson. I admire the optimism of the Conservatives as they languish at 20% in the polls, but they may well rally from here. And he has at least brought some peace and calm, I'll grant him that. In a moment, we go to Dover and we find out what happened in someone's house after a beach landing, an illegal beach landing on Sunday morning. Going to give you the full story and ask why the Kent police did their best to cover it up.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back. So, is it all happy families? Are the Tories now united? Will they sail forward and rise up the polls? That's the impression everyone's trying to give today. I have my doubts. Some of your thoughts. Alan says finished is the word. Patrick says Sunak has no idea how people are suffering under his policies with Boris. Also, with his money, he doesn't understand what it's like to go without. Also, no mandate, and that point is one that I think will come back and be discussed. Mark says, no political party is ever united nor ever will be. Well, I tell you what, under a first-past-the-post electoral system, there is some truth in that. And Charlotte says, they're pretending to be. Behind the scenes may be a different matter. Well, what of the Labour Party? What are they making of all of this? We've heard cries constantly from Sir Keir Starmer for a general election, questions about the validity of the mandate of the Prime Minister. And Tandesi, Labour Member of Parliament for Slough, joins me. Kind of a week ago, I thought you were in with a good shout of a general election. Such was public. I think that night, when they were sort of not quite fighting in the lobby, but you were there and witnessed.
That's right.
It was a pretty ugly scene, wasn't it?
No, well, absolutely shambolic. And that has actually been representative of the government for the last few years. And yeah, there should be a general election. I think the British people need to have their say, because we're having this chopping and changing. We've had 3 prime ministers now, Nigel, in 3 months, 4 chancellors in 4 months, 3 home secretaries in 3. It's just absolutely ridiculous. You know, this merry-go-round, this chaos is got to stop. But all of this chaos has been off the backs of ordinary, hard-working Brits. The taxpayers are the ones that are footing the bill for this. If it wasn't for the Bank of England stepping in after that kamikaze budget, then I think it would have been even worse for our pension funds. And let us also not forget that we have now got a Tory premium on our mortgages, extra rents.
Hang on. I mean, you know, interest rates across the West are rising, and they're higher in America than they are here. I mean, look, you know, did they mismanage the mini budget? Yes, I would agree with you. They did. Was there a panic? Yes, there was. I get all of that. But here's the point I'm making to you. This time last week, if we'd gone out and asked the public, do we need a general election? Quite a lot of them would have said, yes, it's chaos. Now, and, you know, I'm not sure Sunak can hold party unity together, but now the demand for a general election is ebbing away, and that's not good news for Labour, is it?
Well, look, as you said, it's because there seems to be some sort of stability. But as I think yourself and me and others who are politically seasoned observers of politics will know that behind this facade, there are still the same divisions. I think Boris Johnson and co, who actually their faction ended up putting in Liz Truss into the premiership because it was anybody but Rishi. They will now be biding their time. I think they will probably wait until the Privileges Committee hearing is over,
which would be a big moment.
Then precisely, and then I think next year they will no doubt make their move once again, because this psychodrama that is the Conservative Party, that will continue. But all of that is to the detriment of our country. Our international reputation is in tatters. And look, you know, it's not the Labour Party's figures. According to international observers and figures, we have now got predicted the lowest growth of any G7 nation. And let us not forget what Rishi Sunak, while he was Chancellor for 2.5 years under Boris Johnson, he has presided over the highest tax burden since the
Labour government.
Since the 1950s. That's it.
And would Labour reduce the tax burden?
Well, look, what we've said is we want to make sure that our public services are well run, that we want to make sure that we only have that taxation that is required, that there's a balanced budget in order to ensure that there is sound economics. I think that's what Sir Keir Starmer...
I'd love to see a balanced budget. At the moment, no one can produce it. But isn't that... But there's not going to be... Come on, face the facts. There's not going to be a general election, is there?
Well, I think you should never take anything for granted. We have got to make the case in front of the British public. We will make the case. I think all of the opposition parties are adamant on this, and that is with the majority of the British public.
They've still got a majority of 71 or whatever it is, and I don't see that changing. Last thought, you know, a lot of this luck is a very important thing in life. You know, give me lucky generals, Napoleon said. And Keir Starmer, without having to do terribly much over the course of the last few months, has seen opinion polls falling into his lap. That may change over the course of the next couple of years, who's to say? But he doesn't really cuss it with working class voters in the north, does he? He doesn't have... This is not a Labour... You know, you've had Labour leaders in my lifetime like Neil Kinnock, big personalities, Tony Blair, clearly a very dominant leader. Starmer hasn't quite got it, has he, as a leader?
Oh, Nigel, look, I would contest that supposition simply because of the fact that people now, after this kamikaze and liability Liz and everybody else that's been there, people want strong, serious leadership, and that is what Keir Starmer is offering. And I think if you look at the project, as he outlined when he took control of the Labour Party after the disastrous...
Dull leadership.
Not dull, serious leadership. Right. Look, if I wanted a stand-up comedian, I would go to the comedy club. You know, that's not the sort of game that we're in. Across the water here, in Westminster, people should be voting for serious politics, sound economics, and that is what the Labour Party now offers.
Well, I tell you what, PMQs without Boris Johnson would be a lot more serious over the course of the next few months. It could be boring. Tam Dessy, thank you very much indeed for giving us the Labour perspective. And I mentioned there Keir Starmer and his appeal to working class voters, particularly in the north of England. And of course, I'm talking about the Red Wall. You see, my supposition yesterday is that Rishi Sunak might bring stability, but that I could not see him cutting through in the Red Wall in any way at all. Now, there's been some polling out today on this, and I have to say it's been mixed. YouGov's polling suggests that Rishi Sunak is a disaster in the Red Wall. Other opinion polls don't support that. Maybe it's too early for us to judge. But I wonder, Richard Holden, North West Durham, Conservative Member of Parliament,
see you again, Nigel.
Red Waller, you know. Let's be honest about it. You know, whatever good qualities, and we know that he's educated and intelligent and been successful in life, and we know all those things about Rishi Sunak. Can you imagine him in your constituency coming into a working man's club and sitting down with the gang and having a drink on a Saturday afternoon watching the racing?
Well, I can tell you what I can imagine him doing, and I don't need to imagine it, Nigel, because he came to AA flags and sat with the seamstresses there as they were making bunting for the Platinum Jubilee earlier this year, and cracked on with them really nicely just a few months ago. And he came up and during his leadership campaign, met my North West Durham Conservative Association, pretty working class Conservatives, as you can imagine. But
that's a little bit
got on well with them.
That's a little bit, yeah. I mean, I get it with Conservative activists. I get it, and I understand it. Point I'm making is he's actually socially very awkward.
I don't think that's true. I don't know how much time you've spent with Rishi, but I wouldn't describe him as socially awkward. I think he is focused, and I think for this moment in time, we need somebody who's very focused. We've got big international hits on the economy, particularly following Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the impact that that's had. That's been a major issue, and the knock-on energy prices. I know in the last few days we've seen some of those wholesale prices starting to ease a little bit, but we're still facing the headwinds from that, and we don't know whether that's going to be a long-term thing or a short-term thing. So, but we need somebody serious to deal with it, and we've got to, and we've got that.
He's definitely serious. In fact, I mean serious to the point of being incredibly dull.
I don't say that. I wouldn't say that at all. I mean, he's certainly when I've been with him in my association, when I've been with him on the campaign, you know, and you could see him at the London hustings actually. You know, just a few weeks ago during the leadership contest. You know, he was out there, can pump up a room. People enjoyed seeing him, and they want him there. And I think now that combination of somebody who's serious, who's got the experience, and is going to provide some credibility and also competence to the central government.
He'll certainly bring stability. He'll certainly calm things down after the chaos. But the splits in your party are great. Everyone's playing Happy Families tonight. Can it last?
So I think that's a really good point, actually, Nigel. Today, I've just been looking at the cabinet reshuffle as it happened. I think what we saw with when Liz took over, and I think she probably admitted this herself in retrospect, and I have a lot of respect for Liz, but she didn't open it up. She didn't keep it broad. Tonight, you've seen Foreign Secretary James Cleverly stays the same, a big backer of Boris and a big backer of Liz. You've seen Suella Braverman back in there. I think that's another appointment to show how broad it is. Jeremy Hunt stayed, the other side of the party, but keeping that broadness. Yep. I think there's real breadth there, which has been delivered tonight. And he said, judge me by my actions. Don't judge me by what I say, right? Judge me by my actions. I'm going to deliver unity, and I'm going to show it. And he started to show it tonight.
Let's see if it holds, Richard Holden.
We shall. Thanks, Nigel.
Love your enthusiasm. Isn't the optimism of all these people wonderful, whether they're Labour or Conservative? Now, let us go to Kent. It's Sunday morning. A news report reached me that had been 2 boats had landed on Shakespeare Beach, and they got there right across the channel without detection. A report reached me that a migrant that had landed on the beach had gone into somebody's house. I posted this to find that Kent Online said my claims had effectively been debunked. Well, we spoke to the Kent police about this and as to why Kent Online had published this. And Kent police said, for guidance, a man is reported to have made a request to use a phone at a property. No offences have been committed. He has been dealt with by immigration officials. And then they come back and say, Kent police received a report at 10:45 a.m. on Sunday that a man had entered an insecure door at a property in Dover, requested to use a phone. He was initially arrested and then de-arrested at the scene. So we've got the Kent police effectively covering up, at least as I see it, what went on, leading to an inaccurate news report about me in Kent Online, which I'm pleased to say has now been corrected. So let's get the proper story. Let's go right now to the village of Aycliffe, which is where this happened, and let's talk to Sue Doyle, who was the resident involved. Sue, a very, very good evening to you. I know you're there with Louise, your neighbour, who was involved in all of this. Just tell us very briefly the truth, because it's been so confused by some of these media reports and police statements. Please tell us the truth of what happened on Sunday morning.
Into the garden, and then the dog came in. I thought I'll finish my coffee and then go and shut the door. And then next minute, this lad is in my front room. He told me, because the dog was barking at him, he told me I've got to shut the dog away, which I did. And then he didn't ask to borrow my phone, he demanded my phone.
Gosh. And I mean, I'm guessing that at this moment in time, you must be pretty scared.
Well, yeah. I was in the house on my own. And I was like...
And then Louise... And then your neighbour Louise got involved in this.
Well, what it was, Sue came knocking on the door, and I opened it, and she was in a right state, and she kept going, "There's an immigrant in my house," and I'm like, like what? She goes, "Louise, there's somebody in my house." So I didn't even think twice. I put my shoes on, I yelled up to my partner, I told Sue to stay. I've gone round there. I don't know who's round there. All I know it's a man. I've gone guard up, gone into the front room, looked into the front room, there's no one there. Looked into the kitchen, no one there. Shouted out, "Hello," no answer. So I've gone heading upstairs. I've gone, "Hello." I heard a hello back. So it's like, oh, he's in Emilio's room. So I've opened the door. Emilio is Sue's grandson. So I've opened the door. There is this young lad sitting on the floor, leaning up against the cot with 2 mobile phones, messaging. I've gone, "Oh, you're not meant to be here." He's like, "Not English, not English, no police, no police." I didn't know what I was walking into. And the media has got some kind of confusion that I grabbed him up by his neck. I didn't. I grabbed the scarf and I pulled him up and I screamed, "You are not meant to be here." As I'm trying to get him out of the bedroom down the stairs, he's like, no police, no police. You phone. He phoned somebody. I spoke to a woman. We couldn't understand each other. There was a big language barrier. Then he tried to phone in somebody else. And I'm helping him downstairs. I'm giving him a little nudge down the stairs. We got outside to the outside the front door. I didn't push him downstairs. I just gave him a helping hand. Got outside the front door.
Well, I have to say, thank you. No, well, thank you to both of you for clarifying this. Louise, I don't know whether you're very brave or very stupid. I'm not sure. But I think,
do you know what?
Is there just a final thought from both of you? Living where you do, as close to Kent's beaches, does this mean in future you have to keep the door locked?
Yeah, and the schools have to keep the children inside as well when they come over, because they go on to the school playground, which is Aycliffe Primary School. So the school has to go in lockdown as well. So it's not just us residents, it's the school as well. And the kids are not allowed to go out and play. I think it's ridiculous and it needs to be sorted, because this is not the first time it's happened. It's happened on a number of times when they come over, because they scatter here, there, everywhere. And Can I just confirm? I spoke to a gentleman that did some translation, and why I was standing outside with this young 16-year-old, because I see his passport, it had a number, May 2006 on it. Can I just confirm, he was waiting to get picked up by a blue Golf.
He demanded I drive him to Manchester.
Yeah.
It is an astonishing story, but it's also a scary story. And I want to say, Sue, Louise, thank you for giving us a full, unedited account of what happened and what the consequences are for your community, for your village. Thank you very much indeed.
Please, may I say before
Well, there
we
you
go...
are, folks.
Please, may I say before we go, Kent Online owes you and the resident of Aycliffe, i.e. me and Sue, a big apology for saying how fake it was and that they debunked it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, they have withdrawn the article. We are heading in the right direction. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Suella Braverman, our new Home Secretary, I hope you're looking at that. In a moment, Talking Pines, I'm going to be joined by a Russian emigre who's written an amazing book called An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West. We'll delve into that in a couple of minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel, And every morning at 6 a.m, it's Breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Yep, it's that time of the day. Konstantin Kisin joins me on Talking Pints. Welcome to the show.
Cheers.
Now, Russian emigre, Russian dad, Ukrainian mum. So I guess that's been a pretty stressful experience over the last 8 months or so. But you come to this country and you completely embrace the culture of this country and you become a comedian. How is it? It's interesting, isn't it? A comedian who is, it seems to me, you're so upset by cancel culture, by the limitations that increasingly come on free speech, that now you're a blogger, a commentator, and you've almost become a political activist.
Well, I hope I haven't become a political activist because they're all usually crazy. But
a campaign activist.
Yes. Well, there's certain things the thing that upsets me the most, Nigel, is I think we're undermining some of the values that made this country what it actually was, which is a pretty great place to be. And the idea that we should be able to make jokes, that we should be able to speak freely, that we should be able to robustly but respectfully discuss political ideas, that seems to me quite important. And the fact that we seem to be throwing that away, I think, is very dangerous. So more than anything, I just think we need to remember actually what is great about Britain and more broadly the Anglosphere and the West in general, and focus on that instead of, look, we're going to bash each other about all the time over politics. That's what we've always done.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, what is horrific, and I know you talk about it, and you've got Trigonometry, your podcast, which is very popular. It's this, we could have an argument over a drink. We can agree to disagree and respect the right of somebody else to have a different point of view. But how do you see, I mean, with big media, with big tech, I mean, are we really moving into an age of censorship?
We could be, and that's why maybe to the extent that I am active or an activist, that's why I think about those things very carefully, because I think the internet is in many ways the solution to the problem, but that's where the big tech part of what you're talking about comes in. Are they going to censor everybody who has a different opinion? And so far they do occasionally, but it hasn't been too bad. And that's why, you mentioned Trigonometry. That's an out for people. It's an opportunity to hear it.
I've appeared.
Yeah, and we've also had the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion on the show. We try to have people from different points of view. And I think that's really important, and online allows you to do that, which is why the show's, I think, successful.
So, but that's fine, but you rely on YouTube to allow you to put your content out. If YouTube get hacked off with you tomorrow, you've got a problem, haven't you?
I do. And that's why I am very, very aware of the fact that we've got to make sure that as our society moves forward with all this new technology, we preserve the right of people to speak freely, to express their opinions, to joke, to mock, to satirize things, to say things that people don't want to hear. That is what free speech is about. And if we can start there, then we can start building a more positive culture, I think, around all of these things.
Because you grew up under Soviet communism. You left the country, you were about 10 when the Berlin Wall fell?
Yes, yeah.
So you've lived under a communist system.
Yeah.
And the remarkable thing is Konstantin's book, An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West. And I have to say, the book did get very, very good reviews. Just explain to the audience, and we've done a little bit of it already, explain to the audience why you wrote this book.
Well, first, I think someone should write a book actually defending the West and some of its values, and by the way, maybe reminding people what they actually are, because we seem to have forgotten. I noticed that people sort of flinch when you suggest that there is such a thing as Western values or British values, and I actually think they're worth defending, they're worth protecting, they're worth talking about. We should find out what it is that makes us who we are, and particularly in the world that we're about to live in, where Russia and China are becoming very strong threats to us, and they're different to us. They think differently. They have different values. So we got to work out what it is that we believe and what makes us who we are, so that we can present, first of all, to ourselves a vision of our future that is inspiring.
We're a terrible country. We're a terrible country. We're the only country in the world that ever used slavery. We're the only country in the world that ever adopted colonialism. I mean, it is unbelievable what some of our youngsters are being taught at school and university. You would think, honestly, to listen to some of this, that we are uniquely bad. Where does this self-loathing come from amongst us?
I think we're victims of our own success, Nigel. We've been so prosperous and so comfortable and so safe, and things have been so stable for so long. It's very tempting to look inward and to start navel-gazing and being all introspective about, aren't we? You know, this privilege that we actually, people talk about this type of privilege, and that the greatest privilege we have is Western privilege, and that's sort of something that we ignore and pretend doesn't exist, and that's why we invent all this stuff to obsess about. As you say, I talk about slavery and all of this stuff in chapter 3 of the book, because I think most people in the West actually don't realize that slavery had gone on through the entire history of humanity. Probably.
No, surely not.
There are plenty of writers, including many black writers and sociologists and historians, who've detailed, for example, the trans-Saharan slave trade, which was much worse, happening at exactly the same time as the transatlantic slave trade, and only stopped because the Western colonial nations invested a huge amount of money in preventing this from carrying on. So I think we've got to have a measured view. Look, no one would suggest that the British Empire was perfect, but I think it's important to remember the Ottomans and the Russians weren't woke either.
I'm going to say, it wasn't uniquely bad, and that's really the point.
We can only be just in our own time, and I think that's really the thing that people need to take away from all of this.
Kemi Badenoch had a run recently at being Prime Minister, and she was never going to win, but put down some very important, I thought, cultural markers. Which way is this battle going? Are we winning or losing at the moment?
Well, it depends how much I've had to drink, Nigel, when I answer that question. I think that we're making progress. I don't think we're winning. I think we're starting to win some battles. When I see that, something like the Free Speech Union, for example, is an organisation that defends people who've said the wrong thing.
Toby Young, who's sat in that chair before.
And whatever their political views, by the way, he's obviously on the right, but he will defend people on the left who get into trouble. I see people in culture, in my space that I come from, starting to have conversations, not just about, how do we stop ourselves being cancelled, but actually, how do we create comedy of a different kind? How do we allow musicians who have the wrong opinion to express themselves? All of these things are going to take shape over time. So what we need to do is build a more positive counterculture that's cool, because eventually all this extreme progressivism will become boring and stale, and people won't want to be part of it. And we've got to have something punk going on in the countercultural space, and that's what I'm excited about. But no, as I look outside into the world, I don't think we're winning right now, but we are starting, I think, to shape the movements that will change it.
Keep going, and thank you for coming on Talking Points.
Thanks for having me.
OK, let's go into a couple of Barrage the Farages. Mike asks, when will this country realise that uncontrolled immigration is a huge mistake? Well, the politicians would never realise it, I have to answer that by telling you. Kumar asks, do you think Rishi Sunak will donate his salary to charities like President Trump did? What does the comedian say?
Be a good idea, wouldn't it? I mean,
it'd look good, but it's never, ever going to happen. Laura asks, could the Tories be wiped out at the next election, even with Rishi as PM? Well, look, Professor Goodwin said they're at 20% in the polls. The likelihood of being wiped out under this system is not high, but it did happen to the Conservatives in Canada 30 years ago. You never know. I'm done. I'm going to hand you over right now to Mark Stein.
Yeah, that 1992 Canadian comparison is looking more and more relevant, I think, Nigel. Great show. And I am utterly disgusted, by the way, at hearing that account from those two ladies in Kent. And they are quite right to excoriate Kent online. It's interesting to me the way both the media and the police were so keen to insist that story of a home invasion by one of those migrants was fake news. We're going to try and keep the thrills coming for the next hour. We have Ava Valadinga-Broke, we have Dominique Samuels, we have James Melville, and we have a guest who has to have her identity concealed. That's how exciting it is. All coming up in just a couple of minutes.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. The next few days it will be quite windy, particularly in the west. Further outbreaks of rain at times, but it will be exceptionally mild for the time of year. Looking at the pressure pattern, low pressure still dominates, drawing in warm air from the near continent, but also some stronger winds, outbreaks of rain with weather fronts never too far away. So the rest of Tuesday, outbreaks of rain continue to push their way northwards across the UK, some heavy bursts possible overnight. It pushes eastwards as well, introducing rain to many parts. However, there will be clearer skies, particularly across the east, but even here we'll see some rain by the end of the night. And temperatures, well, where they should be during the day at this time of the year, 14 to 15 Celsius, well above average. So a cloudy start to Wednesday morning. Showery outbreaks of rain continue to push their way north and eastwards. It will be windy. We will see some gales still around the coasts across the west, but it will brighten up as we move into the afternoon. Plenty of sunny spells developing, staying gusty, but despite that, temperatures will lift to 18, 19, 20 Celsius. The average here should be around about 14 or 15 in the south, in the north around about 11. Through the evening time on Wednesday, some clear spells around, the risk of a few showers, perhaps some longer spells of rain across the far northwest of Scotland. It remains blustery, and then overnight we see further cloud and rain pushing up from the south. Some of this perhaps heavy at times across the far southwest, but generally light and patchy in nature. This will help keep temperatures up once again in double figures, perhaps just dipping to single figures under any clearing skies. But most places will start Thursday on a cloudy note, perhaps some sunshine first thing, southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Thursday overall a cloudy day, some patchy rain in places, but there will be dry weather around, 1 or 2 glimmers of sunshine. The wind should slowly ease, but it will stay blustery around the coasts. To end the working week and into the weekend, it stays mixed. There will be some rain at times, some stronger winds, but temperatures well above average.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB Newsday with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB Newsday and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.